everyone, and welcome to episode 511 of the MTG Goldfish podcast. I'm Seth, probably better known as Saffron Olive, and we have the full crew here this week, kicking things off with the owner of MTG Goldfish, Richard. How are you this fine Monday, Richard?
Good morning, Seth. Doing well. How you doing?
I'm doing all right. This cold is hanging on forever, but I'm way better than I was last week, so I can't complain. But we got another co-host in Grim. Good morning, Grim. How are you today?
Very good. Both my teams won. The Kings rolled this past weekend, and most importantly, the Chiefs lost, and the Broncos stomped the Falcons. So that makes me happy. Thanks, Josh Allen.
The Bills came through. Yes, they did. Anyway, we got an interesting cast today. We're going to be jumping around a little bit. We're going to start with kind of first impressions of Foundations. The set's actually out. We got some early tournament results. We've been messing around with the cards. So we're going to talk about Foundations out in the wild. We want to check in on the Marvel Secret Lair drop, seeing where their prices are at. Now it's been a couple of weeks since the big sale. We haven't really talked about the new change about ordering blockers and damage. So we want to talk about that a little bit, and then we get a few smaller topics, some new free decks on Arena, some rebalances, stuff like that. So that's the overview for the cast today. Before we get into it, a reminder that today's show is brought to you by Card Conduit, and Card Conduit's the easiest way to sell your Magic cards. If you ever get tired of the hassles of buy listing, you can skip them with Card Conduit. With their curated service, you can send in as many cards as you want with a buy list value of $1 or more and pay just a 5% service fee. And if you want to do a bit of work, you can use the sorted service where you list and sort your cards in advance and pay just a 2% fee. Either way, you're going to get a detailed report with the results in a fast payment once your order is processed. And right now, you can even get another 10% off by heading over to cardconduit.com/MTGGoldfish. Card Conduit, it's the easiest way to sell your Magic cards. So thank you to Card Conduit for supporting the show. And let's talk some Magic, and let's start with Foundations. So Foundations is out. There was no early access for Foundations. So we started playing it alongside everyone else last Tuesday. And I'm curious, Greg, what's your first impressions of this set? Like, what do you think of Foundations? Now that we got to jam a bunch of games with it.
So far it's been pretty good. It as powerful as a lot of the cards were, so far it just seems like a core set. It has a few cards sprinkled throughout. It feels like all the standard sets of prior were making more of a big splash. So for right now, the only big upgrade is that I think Burn got a lot more in Burst Lightning, and you have Boros Charm and things like that, but you're still seeing Golgari mid-range just with a few pieces changed here and there. I think maybe the only other thing is like Authority of Consuls is back to help combat all the aggro decks, so that's really nice as well. So, the core set is core setting, and it feels decent.
Yeah, I think I will say the power level does seem a little bit fine, I think, but that's a good thing, right? Like, this is a set that's not going to rotate forever or for at least 5 years. So I'm kind of happy to see that the initial impact has been not super high. I would be more scared if we were talking about like, oh my God, look at all these new Foundations decks that are dominating the format. That would actually be a pretty scary thing for a set that's not going to rotate. I've really enjoyed this set. Like, yes, if you just look at the data, it hasn't had a huge impact at the top of the meta. You mentioned Burn. That's probably been the biggest impact. I think if you look at like Moto Leagues or whatever, Bolt Wave is actually the new card that's seeing the most play, showing up in the prowess decks and aggro decks and so forth. So we've seen cards making an impact, but I've enjoyed it just because of the nostalgia is so sweet. Like being able to play with Genesis Wave and Thousand Year Storm and some of these like mazes and these super cool build arounds that are not going to be top tier in the format most likely, are still just so cool to have those back. And it just reminds me of like some really fun standard times from years ago. So I think this set, to me, has been a huge success, even if the initial impact has been kind of medium, I guess, in standard. What do you think about this, Richard? Have you done any foundationing yet?
I see your fun decks and raise you to turn 3 children. So we have a 10K RCQ from SCG. Here are the top cards. So Llanowar Elf slots right into Golgari mid-range, right? Helps you power out your Childreds and whatnot. But so random mid-range deck plus Llanowar Elf, pretty good. It also got Soulstone Sanctuary. So that's the colorless land that turns into a 3/3. So those 2 cards slotted into Golgari mid-range, Bolt Wave into all the red aggro decks, and then Kiora into Reanimator. That's the one that like draws 2, loots 2, and then threshold make an octopus. And then
Yep.
for the crims out there, Crystal Barricade. That's the 2-mana
Yeah.
wall that gives you hexproof and prevents non-combat damage. That goes into various decks. It goes into people playing it in Mice, apparently, Azorius Tempos, Azorius Oculus, things like that. And then also Kellen showed up here or there in mono red decks, aggro decks, Boros, Gruul, etc. Abyssal Harvester showing up randomly. That's the thing that you can tap it to reanimate something from a graveyard that went there this turn. So
notably
there's
a
a
demon.
bunch of cards seeing play, but they're kind of just slotting into existing decks and just like making them a little better. Nothing like crazy happening, but I think Llanowar Elf and Bolt Wave are kind of the 2 clear winners from the set.
Yeah, so
I mean, that's what you want, right? Out of a core set, right? Like, I don't want there to be brand new whole all foundations deck. So that's pretty good.
I mean, especially for this new, not ever going to rotate core set. I think for old core sets, like you treat them like normal sets kind of, but this is a little different because of the lack of rotation. I'm curious about 2 of the 1-drops that came up on that list of played cards. So one is Llanowar Elves, and I gotta say, on Arena, I've seen Llanowar Elves, but it definitely hasn't led to this huge revival of green decks, I wouldn't say. Like, if anything, I see like it show up in the Golgari deck and it looks fine, but it's not like mono green has been everywhere. Elves has still been, at least in my experience, very fringe. What do you think, Grim? Like, is Llanowar going to be relatively safe? Is like the power level of standard just so high right now that Llanowar is just like another fine card rather than like one of the foundations of the format?
I think, yeah. I mean, it'll be powerful. It's still a very powerful card to have. Let's not deny that. But it is balanced in this meta, as I think there are a lot of cards back in like Magic's past that were once like super feared. But I think a lot of those cards could also come back into standard. So after seeing Llanowar Elves sit around, kind of makes me wonder what else we could have had also in like foundations.
Yeah, with like 6 sets a year and like foundations not rotating, I think they can juice the power level, maybe even a little bit more than they did with this set and get away with it. I don't know if I want that after what has happened in Modern, but still, like, I think they have kind of nailed the power level. The other 1-drop I wanted to ask about is Kellen, because I played a Kellen deck. I think it's actually went up on the YouTube today playing some burn-in standard, and I thought Kellen was really bad. I thought this was going to be the best Kellen, because Kellen comes up every set, and every set it doesn't see any play. And I saw 1-drop Savannah Lions Kellen. I was like, okay, this could be like standard Ragavan or something, right? You get the Savannah Lions, you level it up, you draw some cards. But it turns out that I feel like the card's just actively pretty bad once you play with it. What's your impression of Kellen? Have you seen Kellen do anything, played with it or against it?
I think it's okay. Bad. I don't think it's awful or anything like that. It's
I
just,
mean, it's a Savannah Lion still. So, like,
Yeah,
it's a fine aggro 1-drop, I guess. But I was thinking it was going to be, like, a really good aggro 1-drop. And I came away feeling like it's kind of average to below.
yeah. I think it's just average. I think you might have set yourself up for disappointment there, because most of the times when I see people sink mana into it, I just wait and then I kill it, and then the red deck spent all their mana to skip their turn.
The leveling up is what actually killed it for me. Because when you read on paper, I'm like, okay, 1-drop Savannah Lions, level it up, start drawing cards. But when you actually play with it, you realize, okay, if I play this on turn 1 and level it up on turn 2 and hit you, yeah, I impulse draw, but that doesn't do anything because I spent all my mana to level it up. And then you go to level 3 and you level it up at the next turn, and yeah, you get double strike and you impulse draw 2 cards, but you can't do anything with those cards because you spent all your mana leveling up, and then your opponent kills it and you just did all that for nothing. So the leveling up plan, I think, is like, there's times when it's fine, like in the late game, if you're in a top deck battle, like, sure, you're going to play it and level it up. But the plan of like trying to turbo level this up seems very, very bad to me. But what were you going to say,
It
Richard?
is
What do you
nice
think?
that you just have the option to do that, though.
Yeah,
Like,
flexibility.
It's nice.
Seth, would you pay 7 mana for a 3/2 double strike, like impulse draw? Like, no, like the trap is you never level this up. Like it's really a 1 mana 2/1 that has a legendary clause, so you can't even stack them up. And then late game, when you're super desperate and you're like gassed out and doing absolutely nothing, you can spend your time leveling this up. But even then, like, it's gonna take you multiple turns in standard to level this thing up. Like, you can't even like level up and like hit someone, right? You're probably at like 4 mana max, so you have to spend like 2 turns to do it. And then because you spent 2 turns to do it, when you hit them, you can't play the spells you impulse draw. So it's a literally 1 mana 2/1, but we play terrible ones. Remember the one that like deals you damage based on how much damage it takes, right?
Oh,
like
Satyr?
Jack-a-pup, baby.
like there's terrible cards that we play if we're aggressive enough, right? Like if the plan is to just like quad bolt wave you, I just need to chip in like 4 damage or something with a 1-drop. Like maybe this is good enough. But it's certainly not Ragavan. Like it is certainly not Ragavan, right? Like you don't have the dash. You're spending all this mana. You're not going up mana, so it's just a 1 mana 2/1.
It's a 1 mana 2/1, and it doesn't do anything specifically synergistic with the current red decks. It's not like a Heartfire Hero or a Swift Spear that you're benefiting from like slinging spells or targeting it with Valiant or whatever. So I think it's fine, but I was expecting more out of this Kellen for some reason. I was thinking this was the one that was finally going to make Kellen good, but
I played it in Commander, and I'm like, oh, I never want to level this, guy up. Like, what a huge fantasy. Like, what is the point of this?
Oh, all right. One other card I got to ask about in Standard. Bloodthirsty Conqueror, the most, I believe, expensive, at least most expensive new card. Doubling Season might top it if you count all the cards, but most expensive new card, the combo piece that goes infinite with a bunch of different stuff. Krim, what's your week 1 impression of Bloodthirsty Conqueror? Like, is this a legit combo like we've seen with Unstoppable Slasher and Bloodletter of Aclazotz, or is this going to be more of an against the odds style combo, you think?
I wouldn't call it against the odds, right? It's not like it's a shocker if you get some wins with this. This combo is still solid, but it might just be that like when you think about how powerful like a lot of the cards are, this is like plan C, right?
Yeah.
You really want to just like set up early. You may not necessarily need this card, to be honest with you. Like the combo itself may just be a hindrance if you think about it, but it's nice to have in your back pocket. I mean, it's still week 1. There's still cuts and lists being refined to see what you can cut for this, because it is a 5 mana 4/4 that doesn't affect the board when it hits, but it does potentially win if you can get the setup pieces prior. So I think it's decent. I think there's still time for these lists, these black-white lists, to kind of like tune themselves up to get to this point, to get to this card.
Yeah, I think it's felt okay. I've been messing around with it, and you can get some really interesting 1-turn kills, but I think it's a little challenging to figure out exactly what to do with it. I've had the most success just playing it in mono black, with the theory being like, if I play it in mono black and I play Bloodletter of Aclazotz and Unstoppable Slasher, I just have so many of these combo pieces that are also like pretty good cards on their own. Like Slasher's a good card, Bloodletter is a fine card, even Bloodthirsty Conqueror is a pretty reasonable card, but you just overload on all these, like, if you don't kill this thing, I might just 1-turn kill you next turn, and you overload on all of those, and eventually your opponent runs out of removal, and something slips through and hits your opponent. So I think there are ways to make it work, but so far, just going by like tournament results, it hasn't really taken off. But maybe that's to be expected, being like a combo deck, a little bit harder to build than just like, I'm going to throw a Kellen in mono red aggro and attack you to death, or Burst Lightning in mono red aggro and attack you to death. So maybe we'll get there eventually, but yeah, I still think it's a pretty powerful card that should have a chance at some point in the forever that it's in Standard. But what about older formats? So Standard, we've seen some of an impact. In Pioneer, somehow the biggest winner is Goblins. I was not expecting this, but if you look at the first Pioneer League results for Moto, multiple Goblins decks, a Gruul Goblins deck, and then also a Boros Goblins deck, both look really sweet. Richard, what do you think of these new Pioneer decks with some Foundations cards?
Small sample size. Seth was like, sweet Goblins of Pioneer, and I looked at it, I'm like, small Japanese tournament, because we see Boros Goblins and Gruul Goblins, but the only addition Gruul Goblins got, like the new card is Seer Slicer Goblin, and then Boros gets Raise the Pass. I don't know why everyone just wants to play Goblins all of a sudden. I don't know if there are reprints hidden in here. Are there reprints that came back?
Not
but
really. Like
yeah,
that, I pretty much a few new cards.
I feel the Goblin players just got together and be like, yo, let's play this.
It's time.
Right?
I think that's true of Gruul. Like the Gruul Goblin deck, you could play pretty much the same deck without the Seer Splicer Goblin, even though Seer Splicer, I think, is a good Goblin. The Boros build, though, I think you really need the Raise the Past. It's almost like a Aristocrat Goblin combo deck where you're trying to like sack all your Goblins to Skirk Prospector. You got Cacophony Scamps and Fireblade Chargers to deal damage when they die. You have Runvel Horde Master, the Impulse Straws when your Goblins die. So you actually set up like this big combo turn, essentially. So it's almost like an Aristocrat Goblin combo kill. And I don't think that really would have worked at least nearly as well without Raise the Past, just to be able to reanimate everything. Like Rally the Ranks is like fine, but you're probably not going to be able to do it as well as you'd like in a mono red deck because you can't pay Convoke by tapping your red creatures as easily. So I think that's kind of a brand new deck. The Gruul one I would agree with though. Craven, what do you think? Are Goblins a real threat in Explorer Pioneer now? Like, is it changing? Are they back?
I think Seer Slicer is pretty darn good, right? I mean, I more so am also on Raise the Past. That one seems a lot better, and it kind of shows you though, like they have had to trim all their like 3-mana goblins that they would normally be playing 3 and 4, but maybe you don't need those anymore because you've got Seer Slicer, you've got all these other low to the ground goblins, and all you really need to do is just play an Aristocrat style. Although you are missing out on the hasters. The hasters are kind of what make me fear like goblins more than anything else. Because I can disrupt like the sorcery speed stuff.
It's the Boros one is kind of sad because it's not sad, but disappointing. These are all wrong. It's like an all-in combo deck, right? But because we say goblins, you would expect that, if someone indexes hard on graveyard hate or something, you just like pivot them and smash them in the face with goblins. But all these goblins are actually just combo pieces and they cannot effectively put together a beatdown plan. They're all like 1/1s that just sack, right?
Yep.
Like you can't just like slot in 4 lords and kill someone. Because it's kind of funny, right? Like you don't expect this combo deck coming out, and then when it does come out, you're like, okay, I'll just pack like 8 graveyard hate spells in, I'll stop you, and then I'll just smash you with actual goblins. But this deck can't do that. So this deck is actually playing like Deafening Silence and stuff like that to try to stop everyone from interacting with them. So it's kind of cute. So we'll see where this goes.
I'm definitely going to give it a try. I'm excited to give it a try because I've always loved goblins and I also like Aristocrats decks. So hopefully I'll be able to do that for a video at some point. In Modern, there is not much of an impact at all. Like I was digging around trying to find like where is Foundations doing something in Modern. The best I found is Kiora seems playing some graveyard decks. Just the 3-drop draw 2 discard 2 is pretty good with Psychic Frogs and Goryo's Vengeances. There is one deck, probably the spiciest. There was a Modern challenge over the weekend. Not only was it playing Kiora as a reanimator deck, it's playing 4 of the new Komas, Koma World Eater, and trying to Goryo's Vengeance Koma of all things. Richard, you play some Modern. Is this correct?
Seth.
Are we really trying to put Komas into play with Goryo's Vengeance over all the other things we could reanimate?
Yo, so these are league results.
Richard.
Oh, what?
Emperor of Bones.
There is
4 of in that.
There is. That also probably is not correct, but yes, there is 4 Emperors.
Okay,
that is correct.
These are league results, and I think Modern players are like all like on the against the odds trade in leagues, right? Like if you look at any like challenge, it's like 8 energy decks, Boros energy decks, right? All trying to like outdo each other, and then you hit the leagues, and you're like, finally, time to play some good jank. And I think that's where these decks come in, right? Like there's no way.
This Kiora deck 7-2 in a challenge, 7-2 in a challenge. Second place in a challenge, reanimating Koma World Eater.
Chat.
Yeah.
I
guess. Or you can just win with anything if you have Psychic Frog because that card's busted. I mean, it doesn't matter what you're reanimating; it's gonna work out.
Yeah,
no joke. There's like 4 Emperor of Bones that could become a Koma. I'm just saying. I mean, Koma or maybe.
It's like the One Ring, right? You build a deck around the One Ring, your deck is probably good. You build a deck around Psychic Frog, it's probably pretty good, right? And then you put in Kioras and Ulavogs and Emperor Bones, and you call it a day.
So What do you think of Koma specifically as a reanimation target? Because I had not considered this card to be modern playable, but now that I see it in the list, like, so you're reanimating it with something like Emperor of Bones or Goryo's Vengeance, which is going to give you 1 turn with the card, right? You get it with haste for 1 turn, then it's going to go away, and it has Ward 4, which means if you're doing this early enough in the game, it's kind of has hexproof, and then if you hit your opponent, you get the 4 3/3s left over. Is this actually just like a legit Goryo's Vengeance target for modern? Because I did not have that on my bingo card for Foundations.
I mean, that's
think
20 damage.
yeah, I think it is in fair decks, right? Because what does this get you, right? This doesn't draw you cards or do anything. It creates 4 3
Bodies.
right?
Yep.
It creates bodies for you to finish the game, which is perfect for something that's like an actual tempo deck trying to kill you, right? They're not just all in comboing and then trying to do this, right? They're chipping away at you and then just randomly getting you with this combo. So maybe this is the truth. Like, good luck dealing with 4 3/3 bodies in modern. Right?
Yes,
like you know, the
seriously.
people don't play sweepers, right? Like, this is like unbeatable. Plus, you're playing Demir. Like, whatever interaction you did have, good luck resolving it too, right? So, and there's a frog beating you down. Don't forget that.
Yeah.
So maybe this is the truth. Maybe we didn't think spicy enough. Just like getting enough bodies is better than drawing cards, because drawing cards doesn't win you the game, Seth.
When
modern
it comes
players
down
know
to
this.
it, yeah, that's something I've learned over the game. Yeah, at some point
We
you
say that, but
actually
the One Ring, the most
you
meta
actually have
thing
to
ever
kill
in
your
modern.
Oh. Yeah, I mean, I guess the One Ring does work against that, but it's cool to see Foundations at least having some impact on modern. But anyway, if you're listening to this, let us know your first impressions of Foundations. I'm curious to see how everyone else's experience has been. But let's keep moving on. Let's move on to some Marvel Secret Lair drops. So we talked at length about these last week, and one of the big takeaways was, oh my God, these cards are ridiculously expensive, right? If you want to get them on the secondary market, you're paying X2 up to like X5 MSRP. A single storm just to get the commander itself was like $120. Richard, it's been another week. Where are we at now with Marvel cards? Where are prices at?
Yeah. So this past week was especially important because this is when the big marketplaces, Card Market and TCG Player, let normal people sell. So prior to that, you needed to have like some special status, like you're a big store or whatever. And they do that basically so you don't scam people with pre-orders. But now any Joe Schmo can sell their products on these platforms. And the interesting one is Black Panther. So Black Panther's Secret Lair can be bought for basically MSRP. So you can go out right now and get Black Panther for $40 shipped, which is ironically like cheaper than buying the Secret Lair drop itself, because they charge you $10 for shipping if you just buy one. So Black Panther back to MSRP, which was shockingly fast. I did not expect it to be this fast. All the other layers are roughly like 2x their price, maybe 3. So Storm is about like $85, right? So MSRP would be 30. Right, for the non-foil, and 40 for foil, or is it 40-50?
They were 40 and 50 for these ones.
40-50. Yeah, so it's twice MSRP. And then Wolverine is like $70. Captain America is $60. Iron Man is $60. So the basically non-Black Panther is about 2x MSRP, maybe slightly under that. Black Panther already at MSRP.
That's actually way better than it was just a week ago as far as prices. I'm like kind of surprised. I wasn't sure what to expect with this. I was thinking, Marvel, all these Marvel collectors, these cards are going to be super scarce. Is that just not playing out this way? Like, what does this tell us? Does this tell us that a lot of the cards at the original sale were actually bought by like scalpers or bots, or just overbought by people who got in the hype and were like, well, I only really want one of these, but I might as well buy 3 or 4 of them and just sell them? Like, is that the message that we should take away? And should we expect these to keep coming down in price, you think?
For the near term.
I mean, yeah, like in the short term, this is going to drop, but that's like how a lot of things are. And then usually after some amount of time, they spike back up. They start climbing again. So like I assume this is just like every other Secret Lair, comes out, it drops, they sell for MSRP, maybe a little under, and then slowly over time, this will just go back up, and it may go up. I think it'll, as I said, I think at the end of the day, in a couple of years, it'll sit where they were, around the hundreds.
So my question is, you're a player. You missed out on the sale, right? You couldn't get your copies through the sale. Should you go out and buy them now? Like, is this the point where you're paying, okay, MSRP for Black Panther, what, like 1.5 MSRP for most of them, and Storm's like double MSRP? Like, is this the time to go buy them if this is something you want? Or should you keep waiting in hopes that over the short term, prices are going to keep going down and you're going to get even a better deal in another month or two?
You're
I mean,
playing the game of
I
chicken
think
with everyone else, right? Everyone else
Yeah.
is like, oh, is it gonna drop lower, right? And like, oh, I'll just wait a little bit. And then, the minute people decide to pull the trigger, it starts going back up, right? So I guess you got to gauge demand. The other important thing was Maro posted on his blog this week that these cards will see a reprint somewhere in the future, but unknown
Somewhere,
where.
someday.
Right, but you could probably make an educated guess that it'll probably show up in the Marvel set corresponding to that character, right? It seems sus to make another secret lair with these exact cards, and it would be extremely strange for, Iron Man to show up in the Spider-Man set, but you never know. Like, there's lots of crossover and stuff, but one would expect that when we have the Iron Man set or the X-Men set or whatever, that the X-Men would show up there. So we do have that looming. And then the other thing that I foresee, so Storm is a super interesting one. Right? So Storm, like everyone wants to play Storm. And I watched Commander Clash where we played Marvel. And I have a feeling that Storm is going to get shamed out of the community, and like Wizards kind of botched this one, right? Because like even at the LGS, everyone is just so excited to play Storm. And I'm like, yes, but I wonder if you're gonna get shamed out of your play group like so fast, because no matter what you do with this commander, it's so broken that it's so good you can't play it with the straight face kind of deal, right? So I wonder what actually happens with Storm, because it clearly is the best card and it's commanding the highest premium of all the layers. But I wonder if you can actually play this card in your pod or not, or does it have to sit on your mantle and be like, yes,
It's
like so.
the power level's kind of ridiculous. We definitely learned that on Commander Clash, where I think, Krim, you built the Storm deck. And I would say, from my perspective, you built like a pretty fun and janky version of Storm. It was like a Storm mill deck, and it still just absolutely rolled the rest of the table. Like, it reminds me of Golos. We've talked about this before, how I built the Golos Scouts deck, and even when you try to make Golos tame, it's still just so busted. Is Storm one of those commanders, Krim? Is it just like so strong that no matter how you build it, it's going to be the arch enemy at the table?
Yeah, I think this is going to be one of those ones where even if you build the jankiest version possible, people are starting to catch on that, yeah, maybe we can't let you live. Like,
Yeah.
I had no protection. I had no nothing, right? I just like, I'm going to fairly just attack you. Okay. And the one thing, though, that is nice, like, you just need to get any spell, like, in the post-combat phase to cast, like, once or twice more than it normally would. And that's more than enough. It doesn't have to be a big spell, even. It could be a small spell, and it's still really good.
I would say, wrapping back around to the prices of these cards, I think I would just buy them now. Like, if I was someone who 2 weeks ago was going to spend $40 plus shipping plus tax to get these cards through Wizards, and now I can get them for $50 or $60 with free shipping, and I'm not sure how tax works on eBay or TCG, but like, you're paying almost the same price, right? You're paying a very minimal premium. So I think if you're going to buy them for $40 2 weeks ago, you might as well just buy them now for $60 with free shipping and pay the extra $10 or whatever. Otherwise, I would say just wait for what Richard said, where they will eventually be reprinted, and then the prices are going to come down a ton. If you want to play with them in the next year, though, or whatever, then I guess I would just snap them off now.
Wait, there's one more piece of data we have here, which who knows if this is actually correct or not, but you can see the sales velocity on TCG Player. So if we look at Storm, the secret lair drop, and I look at how many are sold every day, there's like, I don't know, 10, 15 sold every day. That's very low. That's very low, right? So that tells me that this inventory is stocking up and scalpers are going to keep undercutting each other. Like, I don't know, right? We go from selling out in literal seconds to like only like 10, 15. People are waiting for it to go down. So I feel it'll go down further. But the question is, are like 1,000 people waiting for it to go down and they're going to snap it up at any second? But I think we're still pretty early. I think you can wait it out a little bit longer. But I don't think like Storm will go back to MSRP. I do think it will like stop somewhere above MSRP and start going back up. But there's got to be some separation between the other four, right? Like Captain America, Iron Man, Wolverine. Like, are they all equally popular? We already saw, if you're scuffed like Black Panther, I don't know why people just don't like Black Panther, but during the actual sales, we saw it too. It was the last one to sell out. It's already at MSRP. So I imagine we'll get another one to MSRP or close. So Storm, I think, is the exception. You might want to snap Storm up, but of the other ones, like surely some of them will go down further, right?
Yeah, I mean, I think that we could see them still decline. And I think long term is anyone's guess. It could be what Grim said, which makes sense that like these are super exclusive and 2 or 3 years from now, they're not being sold. They go back up in price. But I don't want to say fear, but wonder if it could go the other direction where maybe there's like a better Black Panther or a better Iron Man. And these ones are not actually that hyped 2 or 3 years from now. And they don't actually command like a huge premium because you got a better version of the cards to play. So it'll be interesting to see how it shakes out. But it's good that the prices are coming down. It was looking very bad 2 weeks ago. It's looking much less bad today.
Now that you mentioned that, Seth, not finance advice. Don't listen to any of this, but these are going to go MSRP because you know that in the set, of the proper Marvel set, there is going to be a special showcase or foil version, and that's surely got to be better than whatever this is. This is just borderless, right? But imagine like
the Marvel foiling.
I don't want to. I don't do the One Piece. The One Piece comparison is the manga cards where they just like straight up take manga panels, shove the art on there, call it a day. Surely someone at Wizards has figured this out, right? That if I take comic book panels, slap them on a card, slap Iron Man on there, that's the most banging thing you can possibly do. Surely someone has figured this out. So that Iron Man is going to be way more premium than this Iron Man, right? Plus you got like serialized cards. Plus you can have like Iron Man foiling or some garbage. So if they're reprinting these in the sets proper, there's going to be like a way better version. So
yeah,
the guess is like, do you want to play with them today? But if you want the most banging version, I think you wait. I think there's got to be some crazy Storm foil coming, right? Like you can do so much with this, right? Like the manga panels, Krim.
Oh yeah.
Oh no. I definitely want that. Like, good Lord, yes, please put these on comic book panels. I want that so bad. I want the Kirby art. I want the wild comic book art on there.
Oh,
will it happen?
Here's the question for you. I don't know what the answer is. Would you want the Storm art? I love the Storm art for this drop, right? But would you prefer the Magic Artist version or like an actual like original comic book version, like a comic book artist, like a Peach moment with Storm? I think I gotta go with the comic book source, right? Like,
I would like that. Yeah, I think I would like that. I think there's no way you can't just have two, right?
I mean, that's what they'll do, right? Like we see with the Japanese cards where we have like the normal pack version and then they get these special Japanese artists to do the anime cards. I imagine, couldn't you just do the same thing, right? Do the Magic version and then get the comic book artist version for some special treatment.
The good one will be too expensive and out of our reach, so we must buy this one. It's like, I'd like a fracture foil, $200. Okay, I think this extended art for $2 will do.
So let's move on. There's another topic that came up a couple weeks ago, and we've been so busy talking about other stuff and Foundations and Commander that we haven't actually talked about this, I don't think at all, which is we had a relatively meaningful rules change that actually just went official alongside Foundation. So it's how you're supposed to play Magic now. Richard, what is this rules change? And maybe you can give us an example of how it actually works in practice, because it's a little confusing.
Okay, we figured it out. So a while back, like a couple months ago, they decided to change how blocking works. So previously, you would order blockers, and you would have to assign all the damage to the first creature until it died, and then all the damage to the second creature until it died, etc., until all the damage is assigned. Wizards said it was too confusing and that they're going to remove the ordering of blockers, and that that you can now distribute the damage however you want. So it doesn't matter based on the ordering of blockers. And then we were all confused. I know we spent like a huge chunk of Vegas being like, what's the point of this? Like, is this like, what does this do? So I dug up the example where it actually matters, okay? So if you have a 5/5 attacker and there is a 3/3 blocker and a 4/4 blocker, okay? So you would order the 3/3 first because you want it to die. And then so normally you would deal, 3 damage to the 3/3, then 2 to the 4/4. If the defender has a giant growth, they can pump the 3/3 to a 6/6. Because you have to assign all the damage to the first blocker, you assign 5 damage to the 6/6, both creatures live. With the new rule change, you can just decide to assign all the damage to the 4/4 now after the trick goes off, so that you now have a trade rather than just being like totally blown out. So that is the actual tangible difference where it makes a thing. And Wizards' argument was that no one really knows how this works, right? And it's complicated. It doesn't work intuitively the way you think it is. So they made it work like this. And I don't know. Like, who actually runs into this scenario, right? I feel this is like a not, like, I don't know. Like, very rarely do we run into this scenario. So I feel this effectively is like no change to us. And it's just another thing you need to remember if you've been playing for a long time. Right? Like, we've been through several rule changes and you probably remember how old rules work. So now you can think, oh, wait, they changed it. It works like this. But for new players, according to Wizards, this is how intuitively it should work. So it shouldn't bother new players.
I don't know how intuitive it is either way, honestly. I think it's just like a weird situation either way with like pump spells being cast during combat or whatever. So I don't know if it like solves much, but I am curious, Crib. Does this matter to us? Like, I think, so I can see where this would matter a lot to someone who's mostly a limited player. Because when I think of limited, that's where I think of like double blocking, casting pump spells on defenses, removal spells, like that stuff that comes up quite a bit in limited. As someone who doesn't play much limited though, and plays standard or pioneer modern, does this change our lives like at all, really? Like, I'm trying to think of the last time a scenario where this rule would have mattered applied to a game of standard or pioneer modern I played, and I'm having a hard time coming up with one, honestly.
Yeah, like that is a very specific scenario that Richard has brought up, and I feel that I don't know how often we're gonna see this.
Yeah,
I'm curious if this tells us though something about the future of cards. Like, will we be seeing more, I don't know, giant growths or something like that, right? That might be really good. This way, if you double block, like maybe how we block in the future will change. In that, like, maybe we're going to want to double block more because there's going to be a bunch of absurd combat tricks. I have no idea. But I think as of right now, I don't think it does too much different.
so let's say I'm playing Golgarian standard, Crim. Should I cut my go for the throats for giant growths so I can get people with this new rule? Do you have any thoughts about that plan?
What if there is a giant growth attached to a go for the throat?
There we go.
So I don't know. I mean, to be honest with you, I feel like we'd have to cook up a really specific situation in Constructed to see this come into play.
Yeah. In Constructed, you usually are unable to block because there's like nothing on the board, or you would if you somehow have two creatures, you would never double block, right? Because your chances of getting blown out are so high, right? That you would never actually double block. So it's very rare. I would think it comes up in limited, where this is a common play pattern, and also Commander. Like you actually might double block to like take something out, and if you get blown out, it's not as big of a deal. But a lot, in 1v1, like we don't even block, period, right? Like most of the time, like your creature doesn't live to like untap and block, right? Or you're just chumping. You're like, blocking with tokens or something. It's very rare that you see like actual like multi-blocks going down and something trading. So I don't think it really matters. And then if you are playing Constructed and being super sweaty, this doesn't affect you because you probably knew all these rules anyway. And then now you just know about this, and no one's playing giant growth anyway, so it doesn't matter, right? So I don't think it matters at all, actually.
Yeah, I think it's pretty fringe that it's going to matter in 60 card formats. I will say, like, I know some people, it feels like the game being dumbed down or whatever, like you're trying to simplify it, which is what's happening, but I don't think it's really a bad thing in this scenario because it just applies to so few cases that I think it's not going to hurt anything. Plus, you can still get some pretty, like, make you feel smart plays out of this where now you can divide up the damage between 2 creatures and then like Pyroclasm post-combat or something to get them. So you can still like find your sweaty, I outplayed you lines even with this new rule. So I think
I guarantee you 99% of players don't know this exists. I guarantee you that. And because the only reason we know it exists is because we have to order blockers on Moto. It adds that like unnecessary step, but like it's not relevant like literally ever. So I guarantee you like most players don't even know what ordering blockers even means unless they were a Moto player. In which case you have to order blockers like literally every time this comes up, even if nothing comes of it.
Even if it doesn't
most people would be like,
matter.
what are you guys even talking about? Like, what is this ordering of blockers? That is my guess.
All right, since no one cares about this apparently, let's move on to another topic, which I want to ask you, since we talked a little finance today. I was looking through Foundation's prices, and one card really stuck out to me, which is Sire of Seven Deaths. So that's the new like Mythic Eldrazi that has the 7 keywords on it. If you look at Foundations, a normal version of this is under $5. Like it's very, I don't want to say very inexpensive, but relatively inexpensive. If you look at though the borderless version, especially the foil borderless version, but it honestly doesn't even matter. Non-foil borderless is $34. Foil borderless is $50. And if you get the mana foil borderless, which are super scarce, $250. So last podcast, Richard, we were talking about if Magic could ever get to a place where people buy cards for non-gameplay reasons, where you buy them because they look cool or you like the character. Is there any chance that's what's happening with the special version of this card? Like, I was comparing it to other borderless cards, and its price is way out of whack. If you look at, like, Bloodthirsty Conqueror, its normal version's $30. Its borderless version's, like, $38, $40. So there's a small premium, but nothing like this. This is, like, X5, X10, the normal version. Why is this card so expensive in borderless? Any guesses?
I mean, it's got the casual appeal, right? Eldrazi, giant big monster, just flavorfully 7 mana, 7/7 with whatever, like with 7 abilities. How good this card is, probably not huge, but I mean, it's got that, right? Like it does have some pretty cool elements to it, especially when you get like, you have the regular version, right? And I opened one of the regular ones and it's just kind of like, all right, cool. But
yeah, Crim threw it away. Not borderless.
Honestly,
out of here with you.
I just gave it away, right? But then I opened the full art one. That one hits. So like that one just has all the cool factor in it. And I don't know, maybe it's the way they display the abilities,
The
like
straight
just down the
line of
center.
text, yeah. It does stand out. It definitely jumps out. What do you think, Richard? Is it just a casual hit and people are willing to pay more for the borderless one in this case?
I don't buy it. It's too early. I mean, I do think the art and the likability matters. I think the waifu Llanowar elves is like sitting at like 100 plus. And I don't think that's because everyone's rushing to play elves in standard, right? So I do think it does matter, but this one seems so weird. It could be some weird thing with the market, or I don't know, man. But we got to check back in like a month or two to see if it's still here. If it's still here in a little bit, then I think it's for real. But so far, it seems so unexplained. Like we didn't even see this with things like Emrakul, Ulamogs. Like why this thing? It's so weird, right? So I don't know. I'm just gonna blame MTG Finance and call it a day. Like that. It's so weird. I don't get it.
All right, well, we'll give us some more time and we'll check back in on this one in the future. So the other thing I want to ask you about is we got some Arena news this week, and the big news, and I got to shout out to Wizards here because I complain at Wizards when they do things I don't like. In this case, I got to give a shout out to Wizards. They added these new player decks to Arena that you just get for free, right? Everyone, they're in your mailbox. If you haven't checked it, go to the top right, click on your mail, you get them in there. It's 10 decks, and these are new player decks, right? They're not like top tier decks or whatever. But these decks have 400 cards, all from Foundations, including over 50 rares in Mythics, all from Foundations. And the decks, they seem functional. There's like a dinosaur deck and a clue deck and a, cast your second spell deck. There's some cool decks in there. My question for you is, Krim, have we ever seen Wizards be this generous before? Like, I know a couple podcasts ago, I was talking about how I logged back into Hearthstone and just got this free deck, and it was super cool, and it made me want to play Hearthstone. In this case, Wizards gave away a lot of rares and 10 free decks to people. This seems like a pretty good thing, and I hope we see more of it in the future. But what do you think about this?
Oh my God, are they actually trying to grow Arena?
Yeah, I know. Who would have thought?
Like, hold on, that's that. First off, take that in for a second. They actually care enough to give you most important what I thought was kind of playable decks.
Yeah,
And I don't know. I know they made the announcement that they wanted to like actually focus on Arena more, right? Push it a little more. And this is a step in the right direction. I think you definitely should still be doing Twitch drops and things like that as well. But I'm happy that they're actually making do and like making good on their word of like trying to grow Arena more, as opposed to just saying it and then it's just like, here, we gave everyone 3 boosters.
yeah. Here's some XP, 2,500 XP.
Yeah, play Foundations, like, oh, okay, cool, sick.
We'll see how serious they are when Marvel drops. If they're like, yo, come to Arena, free Iron Man deck. I'm like, okay, they're serious. If they're like, here, come to Arena, have these janky starter decks that don't have any of the cards you actually came here to play, then no. So if they start giving out like Chase premium cards or like, launch release, you log in, you get like baller super special version of Iron Man, like, okay. So I think when the Secret Layers, or not Secret Layers, the Universes Beyond drops, with they're serious or not, we'll figure out right there, right? Like Final Fantasy tie-in, like you can go ham. Right. And it's all free, right? It's just like digital assets, right? So that's going to be the real test. If they're willing to give away money to make this happen.
I hope this
for
is
starters,
the start
they
of the
gave
trend,
these out after trying to charge us, right, for some really bad decks, right?
Yeah.
Like they are actually giving out relatively decent decks for free. So, hey, maybe they're realizing that if you just let people play your game, it helps you grow the game.
Yeah, I hope we see more of this. I hope this is the first of a new trend, because I think it would be a really positive thing. And like Richard said, like, it's kind of free, right? These are just pixels on a screen somewhere. You don't even got to print them or anything. Like, so giving away more, I think, would be really helpful. And what you said too, Crib, with like Twitch drops, there's so much more they can do with this if they're willing to just like loosen up the purse strings a little bit with Arena. And I think that in the long term, it would really help the game grow. So hopefully we see more of that in the future. Speaking of Arena, we also got rebalances this week. So these apply to Historic and also to the Alchemy format. And there's a whole bunch of them. A lot of them, unless you're playing Alchemy, probably aren't going to really matter. The two that I think are most interesting, we got the Nadu rebalance, and then we got Leyline of Resonance rebalance, both of which I think are rebalances that should have just been the original version of the card. Like, I think they should have just made this new rebalance version. That should have been what they printed in paper. Nadu, the changes, exact same card, but it only triggers twice each turn, period. So its ability is tied to itself. You get Nadu's ability twice each turn. Doesn't matter how many creatures you have. With Leyline of Resonance, the red Leyline, you do the same thing, except you have to pay 1 if you would like to copy your spells, which just kind of keeps you from doing the degenerate turn 2 kill, like cast all my pump spell things. What do you think of these rebalances?
I mean, the red deck ones, I think like the Leyline and the Heartfire Hero ones. Okay, sure. Maybe Leyline Resonance should have costed you a little bit more mana. I think that's a good rebalance there on Leyline of Resonance. Heartfire Hero, I don't know why. Like I think Heartfire Hero is fine the way it is.
They
became a 0/1
to a 0/1. Yes, they took 1 power away. They almost reminds me of the silly the artifact destruction thing where they added 1 toughness to Haywire Might for no reason. Like, why?
Oh, yeah.
Why? Like, why change this modern staple for no reason? It was such a small change anyway. So yeah, I don't know if Heartfire Hero really changes much. In Nadu, it wasn't seen play anywhere anyway. The other one was Grenzo, which was already an Alchemy card, but I don't know if you play much Brawl. In Brawl, Grenzo is absolutely brutal to play against because it heists your opponent's library and then lets you cast things that you heist for free essentially once each turn. So they powered down that pretty massively.
The heck is heist, Seth?
You literally steal from your deck. Your opponent's deck.
You steal one of 3. You see 3 random cards from your opponent's deck. You just steal one of those, and you can play it for any
Does
color.
That build them, or you get a copy of it? Like,
no, it takes the card from their deck. You actually heist it.
So if you heist their whole deck, they die. Okay.
Yes, they would mill out if you could heist their whole deck. So, but Grenzo's just like the best legend for heisting. So they powered that one down. So I think these changes are probably pretty good for Brawl. Like I am excited that like Nadu wasn't super popular in Brawl, but it was super annoying when you ran into it. Even without the best combo pieces, people would still find a way to have like 20-minute turns. And then Grenzo was just a very annoying commander. So I think these are pretty good rebalances overall. I'm curious though, Crib, are we going to see the death of Alchemy finally? Like, we were just talking about these new player decks with Wizards like really pushing standard. Here's all these standard cards. Here's foundations. Play standard now. Do you think people are still going to be playing Alchemy like 6 months from now, a year from now?
Are people playing Alchemy right now anyways? Like, I genuinely do not know. Like,
do you know any Alchemy players? I don't know.
We saw
I
the
know
graph.
Alchemy
The
players.
answer is like, not really, right? Like,
Not a
it's not
ton.
like it's booming.
Like, I know that there are, like historic, people play historic, which has alchemy cards in it, but I don't think I know of anybody that's like actively like getting into the alchemy queues. Most importantly, is this the death of alchemy? I mean, look, again, at the very beginning, I love the idea, but just the execution has been so bad, and I feel like they've been dragging this corpse that has just been like dead for quite some time. Right? Like I think alchemy's been cooked for quite some time. And at this point, I don't know why invest the time into these cards. Like you're using art you could be using elsewhere. You're using a lot of things that could be resources that could be used elsewhere. So not only do I think alchemy is already cooked, they need to actually let it go.
That's kind of where I'm at too. Like, especially when they say things about like, well, we can't like put these, the face commanders from the latest set on Arena because we need the manpower to work on the special guest cards. Like, they're running on pretty tight margins from what they say when it comes to adding cards to Arena. And this is not just adding cards, you're also having to design the cards. So if not many people are playing with it, I'm not sure what Wizards is getting out of it for all the work they put into it. What am I missing, Richard? Is there some upside to alchemy that I'm not seeing?
So oftentimes you wonder if we're in an echo chamber, what we talk about on the podcast, our community, Reddit, social media, we all seem to be in agreement, but then Wizards is like, nah, our data shows otherwise. You guys are just a minority. But their data literally shows no one plays alchemy. So I don't know what the point of this is, right? I agree with Krim. Like, cut all of this. I imagine we're going to see it gone next year. I imagine they do their planning once a year. And, they priced in the resources for this and they're too lazy to change it. Fine, I get that. But I can't see anyone looking at these numbers and be 2025, let's invest more resources into alchemy. So I imagine when next year rolls around, it's going to go bye-bye. Especially since, they gotta up their game for Universes Beyond and stuff like that, right? And I think timeless players don't like these alchemy cards. I don't think historic players like these alchemy cards showing up in their format. It's not even contained to alchemy itself, right? It's bleeding through the rest of the format. So I think it's time to go. I don't think this makes standard any better or anything, right? Like, does this fix anything at this point? No, right?
No, I mean, I guess only upside is it gives you a faster rotating standard like format on Arena. But if no one's playing it anyway, what does it matter? Like in some ways, the community maybe has spoken. And if you look at Wizards data and all the data we have, just like not that many people are playing this format. And I'm sorry if you're someone who loves alchemy, then that's great. And I'm glad that you like it. But yeah, I'm not sure what they're getting out of it at this point either. It seems like a lot of work for very, very minimal reward. So we'll see what happens. But with the shift to Foundations, I wouldn't be surprised if we see alchemy kind of at least go on the back burner.
If they sunset alchemy, do you think we'll get like 50 wild cards or whatever from all of our alchemy cards? Do you think that will actually happen, or do you think they're just gonna be like, nah, alchemy's gone, see ya guys, all those alchemy packs we made you open, worthless? Do you think we're gonna get like 1-to-1 rare mythic wild cards from those alchemy packs?
There is zero chance that
because we opened those packs and they were given to us as rewards, right? They're worth something. They should be our wild cards back, right?
I think
what if you were actually an alchemy player and you spent money building your alchemy deck? How devastated would you be?
Actually, what you're describing is why they probably just leave an alchemy queue up. They probably just stop putting new
Yes.
cards for it and leave a queue up for like the dozens of people who want to play it. And then they don't have to refund anything because you can still play your alchemy cards. I think that's more likely what Wizards would do.
I'm
I
gonna
think.
play a single alchemy game. Maybe they're like, if you played alchemy once, we consider you an alchemy player. We'll refund your alchemy wild cards. I'm gonna queue up for a single alchemy game.
Just in case. Just in case.
Because it's gotta be feel bads if they just like erase all these cards and don't give you
It's
the thing back.
It's currently feel bads when they nerf cards and don't give you anything for it, and that's been something people have complained about for years, and it hasn't changed. So I don't have a lot of faith, but maybe that would be sweet if they did. The windfall of wild cards. Anyway, I think that's our last big topic of the day, but that means it's time for Fishmail. Richard, take it away.
All right. If you have questions, send them to @MTGGoldfish with the hashtag MTGFishmail, and we'll get to your questions on air. Jodacaster, there's been a lot of discussions around players quitting Magic recently. At what point were you closest to quitting, and what would you do instead of Magic?
Ooh.
This one's awkward because it's our job.
Uh,
so quitting comes with a lot more consequences.
That is true. I have honestly never been, I don't think I've ever been realistically close to quitting Magic. I think the closest I've never been close, but probably the closest I've ever been would actually be somewhat recently, just because my philosophy for Magic has always been, if one format sucks, I'll just play another format. That's part of what makes Magic so good, is there's so many different formats. And we went through a period like, I don't know, a year ago maybe, where like Modern kind of sucked and Standard kind of sucked and Pioneer kind of sucked. And I was like, oh no, I'm running out of formats to switch to. What happens when all the formats are in a bad place at the same time? I've never had to deal with this before. So then I made more non-gameplay content and talked about Magic instead of playing it as much. But yeah, I've never actually been that close to quitting ever since I started back in OG Ravnica.
But I think it for me is probably original Eldraine.
Oh.
Or like it's like that was just burnt out. But I don't know if it's because,
Oko.
Yeah, Oko. Oh,
that was one of the, when you go from how good the set prior was into that, like it was the sharpest drop off, and amidst the pandemic, so we were in lockdown, so all you were playing was that. So I think
you were locked
maybe
down
that's
with
a bit of
Oko.
lockdown and Oko, right? Like it's a nice little 1-2 punch. And that's, if it isn't that, I think it was probably, I mean, I think Skull Clamp was pretty bad. That was way back when I was a little kid. So, but even back then, that was like kind of miserable to play. So I think those were the two.
I think quitting Magic is rough because I don't think I would ever quit Magic completely, but I think I've quit Modern. I don't know. Like I feel I have finally let go of Modern, right? Like I've been trying to hold on, Horizon set after Horizon set. I don't know why, but I'm like, oh, after this Horizon set, they'll probably fix it somehow, right? Like I don't know why, right? There's just hope that the new Horizon set would do anything. And then with the latest Horizon set, where it's like finally like, okay, I think it's time to put it in the past and bury it for good. I actually debated just like unsleeving my Jund deck and like selling the pieces or whatever, right? I'm like,
Wow.
I you know what? I think it's Crim's fault. When Crim soul crushingly beat me with a standard deck, untuned,
That was it.
so convincingly, I'm like, Tarmogoyf has like zero shot, right? Like we are so farthest, and I don't know what Wizards will do. So I'm like, I think Modern's kind of dead, right? Like it's like when I'm bored, do I want to go get frustrated, like queuing up into a Modern queue, trying to get Tarmogoyf to do something, right? Like it's like the reverse of what it used to be, where it's like, I'm upset at Standard, let's go play Modern and good old Thoughtseize into Tarmogoyf, right? Have a good time. So I don't know. I think I've quit formats. I will say I'm getting close to quitting Commander though. I feel Commander's like out of control. I feel Commander's just like snowball out of like everything now, and then everyone complains about literally everything. right? Like, we're guilty of this, complaining about Storm, then you interact with someone, complain about that, complain about Farewell. We complain about everything. Like, part of it is just too complainy in general. And the only thing keeping me here is Final Fantasy Universes Beyond. But I am so worried.
Waiting for
I am
Final
so worried
Fantasy.
they'll take my favorite cards and make them like Storm. They'll be too good that I can't play them with a straight face, and then I can't play my cards, right? Like, I'm so worried about that. But, I hope they tune back the Commander release cadence and power level, because at this rate, I think it's gonna like basically become Modern Horizons, right? Like the same thing, right? Like every set needs to up the last one. All your old favorites are gone. Like, try playing like some of your old staples from like a couple of years ago, right? Like, they're kind of unplayable, right? So it's starting to head down that path. So I'm a little scared.
But that's okay. It's Commander. Its unplayability is its charm. And if
nostalgia,
modern,
though, right? Like, I've been playing this deck forever, like, I don't know. Part of it is like I'd like to buy a fancy, like, imagine if you bought like a foil Tarmogoyf or something. Like, remember like the Future Sight foil, like the crazy price ones. You're just looking at that. You're like, what what have I done with my financial life, right? So
remember the Tarmogoyf rare draft at the Pro Tour or whatever? Just because it was worth so much and then got hammered on. Yeah, we have how far it's fallen.
Play Standard. Just play Standard.
Yeah, pick up Standard, Richard. Pick up Standard is pretty good. I'm kind of with you with Modern, but maybe we got to do a whole cast on our relationship with Modern at some point.
Limited is the saving. Every time I play Limited, this is why Magic is a great game, right? I don't know if I get that feeling with anything else anymore outside of Limited. Every time I play Limited, like, who masterfully crafted this together, right? This is great.
Yeah, but then you get blown out by a pump spell because of the rule change, Richard.
That's me. I've been so sweaty. I've been waiting for this moment. I'll order blockers. Got them.
Anyway, I think that brings us to the end of our cast for today. Richard, how do people send in Fishmail for next week's episode?
All right, hit us up at MTGGoldfish with the hashtag MTGFishmail, and we'll get to your questions on air.
And that brings us to the end of episode 511 of the MTG Goldfish podcast. So Richard Cribb, thanks for hanging out. Thanks to everyone for listening. Thanks to Card Conduit for supporting the show. And we'll be back next week to talk about whatever goes on in the world of Magic. So until then, have an amazing week, everyone. And this is the crew signing out.